Welcome to DataTalk. I'm Kathleen Peters, Chief Innovation Officer for Experience, Identity, and Fraud, and your host for Fraud Frontlines podcast series. Today, I'll be chatting with Bhawna Singh, Chief Technology Officer, Customer Identity at Okta. We'll explore the rise of Agentic AI and how it is reshaping the identity, security, and fraud landscape. Bhawna, welcome. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Kathleen. And such a great topic. When you reached out to me about the topic itself, as I mentioned, this is a topic that I'm passionate about more from the reason of how fraud impacts our customers and how I see with AI, it's only going to grow. So I'm so glad and so timely that you're starting this conversation.
Wonderful. I really enjoyed sharing the panel that we did together at Fortune Brainstorm Tech a couple months ago, and we connected and we talked about identity. I feel like that was an area where you and I definitely had this mind meld about the necessity for verifying and securing identity information, especially as the world is moving to AI agents and as we think about how these AI agents are going to scale. And so I know I really enjoyed talking with you more too at that conference, and the things that you were passionate about really resonated with me, and I could recognize some of my points of view matching yours. And so I just knew that I wanted to continue this conversation with you.
Well, the feeling is mutual. I felt similarly inspired and felt that our conversation certainly needed more follow up because just in the space as well that we are in, I think there's so much is going on that needs learning and connecting on these topics. So we are collectively in the tech space and tech professionals growing and learning. So I'm glad that we are having this conversation. And like I said, feeling is mutual, Kathleen. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Bhawna. But before we jump and go diving straight into AI, tell me a little bit more about your background and maybe specifically your current role.
Sure. As a background, many people have such beautiful stories of their journey, and I have such a mundane, boring, very straight line story. I studied computer science. I became a software engineer, and here I am 25 plus years later. But there are some interesting parts of my journey itself where I really have worked in the space of very large platform and scaling it from 0 to 100 million, or starting a new office with 0 engineers to really hiring all kinds of talent in that space. I've done things that adds interesting aspects to my journey, and I've certainly learned a ton through the process. Before Okta, I was the CTO at Glassdoor, and before that, I worked at Ask or Ask Jeeves, that is more common name, and before that, Sybase. I've worked in different industries throughout my career because I certainly play and take learning and extending myself as part of the journey. At Okta, I lead the customer identity product. I joined Okta as part of the Auth0 acquisition almost 4.5 years back. And it's been a great journey, primarily because as a leading identity provider, Okta certainly sits at the forefront of building the right security controls or identity controls to help our customer, both who are in, workforce front, which is IT space or security space, but also customers who are building technology, call it AI technology or any SaaS or consumer technology. How do we protect them? So it's kind of like a full breadth. And I love being in the conversation with many of our customers who some of them talk about the full breadth. Some of them have very specific needs. But the commonality across the space is certainly that they care about the brand, they care about the security, and they care about their customers, which is what I love about how I engage with our customers, and you're one of ours. On the aspect of other things that I do, I also advise companies and help other founders and executives to drive again in cybersecurity, but overall enterprise SaaS space. So it's been a journey of tons of learning, tons of sharing, tons of supporting.
You've had a fantastic journey through Silicon Valley and really interesting, diverse companies. I love hearing about that. Okta has certainly changed the way that we think about verifying individuals, and whether that's for a workforce type of application and use case, or even individual consumers that your business customers are verifying. it's a really important role, and one that Okta, I think, has taken a lead in transforming over time. We're a long day from where we had hardware tokens that we were all carrying around to the cloud-based technology that Okta brought. So here we are today then, and agentic AI is certainly what everyone's talking about. It's what we were talking about on our panel. How do you think about it, Bhavna? How do you define agentic AI, and what is really the significance of securing identity in this new context?
So, very good question. And I do hear folks saying that, oh, AI was always there. So, what's the difference? It is an AI space. AI is a very broad space. And the difference with agentic AI is now we are talking about AI, which even before people would say that, oh, that's a black box or it's magic and things just happen. Now with agentic AI, it's all of the above. It's all of those amazing capability, learning, and decision making. But now we are talking about autonomous decision making, which is as
Autonomous.
humans, we don't have to be there. And looking at the data, the agent can make a different decision while it made a different decision in the morning, the afternoon decision could be different. So now you cannot say that I monitored the morning information, but I skipped the afternoon or all of those. Like we have to be really thorough with our observability and traceability to know what the agent is doing. So that's a big change, which is the autonomous aspect of it.
Mm-hmm.
The other big change is the context that now agents have. Earlier, a context used to be more in the numbers, and it used to be numbers that's provided, tested in the test stage, and we give that in the production, and AI would work on top of that. Now, the agents have so much context. They can also read from the internet. The
Right.
context that we are providing the agent is very broad, very rich, and the best part is it can consume all of that context in one go, which is
Mm-hmm.
what the big token and the limitation and all we talk about. So with that and autonomous decision making, the ability of different, you can say, outcome that we can think of is just enormous. So when you have capability that can make decision on itself and the outcome could be anything or any combination of things, the responsibility for us to make sure that one, not controlling, but making sure that the right guardrails are in place, right? And how do we build trust for us as technology provider and our customers as users of that technology? That is where the challenge comes. And that's why we are talking about agentic AI a lot more compared to how much we discussed AI.
I think you're absolutely right. It's a really insightful comment that you made too about how it's not only autonomous, but the answer is not always going to be exactly the same, right? I think any of us who grew up writing code and learning that or studying logical methods, if you had a certain input, you could expect an output, you could test it, and every time you'd see that input, you would get the expected output. It's different now too, isn't it? When we start to put this generative piece in, like you mentioned, there's a wide range of context, and that context is dynamic. It's changing over time. And so while you may get a similar output, it may not be the exact same output. And when these agents start behaving autonomously, we need to take that into account when we're thinking about security as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, from your vantage point, where you sit today in your CTO position with Okta Customer Identity, what are the biggest shifts that you're seeing in terms of the landscape that are being driven or affected by AI? What's the nature of those kinds of conversations that you're having with your peers?
This is a great question because I will say, a year back, if you were asking this question, I would be more in a pitch mode as to I want us to think about it. This is important. And
Mm-hmm.
and I would like to do more of a knowledge sharing and
You were
pitch.
evangelizing,
You
right?
need to you need to pay attention, right?
Yes.
But I would say a year later, there's been a huge shift as we are talking to our customers. It's the opposite. Now I'm not in the explaining or pitching mode. Instead, I'm in a listening mode, and I'll explain why. Because as the customers started to deploy their first agent or the second agent or the third agent, very quickly they realized either they feel the pressure that they need to put the controls to let the agent not have access to the right
Mm,
tools or data or applications, but then they don't get the outcome. And if they are prioritizing the outcome, then they have to give agent a very broad range of access, which is an open door, as you know, with all the security
mhm.
principles. So very quickly, the customers are understanding that, oh shit moment is landing right there and say, oh, we need to solve for this. And the solution for it is just as, we think of autonomous and decision making, that's how we think of humans as well. And if identity is how we have solved for human controls and checks and balances and making sure that humans are responsible, that's what we need to extend for agents to drive agentic identity and identity controls to make sure that agents are also responsible. We are giving them the right kind of controls for the right data for the right context.
Mhm.
For some context, they might need broader access. For some context, they might not need. So we need to make sure that that setting or capabilities in the technology. And then, of course, we need to make sure that we can discover agents. We don't want rogue agents in our system. We don't want agents creating other agents without us knowing it. So discoverability and lifecycle management of that agent is very important. So these are all the things that we are now hearing from our customers, which is very different from where I was a year and a half back,
Right.
which is a great place to be at because, oh my God, my job is building, which is what I love. I want to
Yes.
build, I want to solve the problems.
Perfect.
Exactly. Last week, we launched our platform in GA. We had a platform in EA, but launched in GA, which helps our customers build agents securely. And it has all of those controls and guardrails. We are rolling out our auth. Everybody's using MCP. What about the
Yes.
identity for MCP? How do you control access and all of that? So we have launched that in beta and we're going to roll out that. Now we are in the phase of listening to the customer, solving those problems. And that's a great place to be at for Okta and making sure that we are truly solving for end to end, which is building as well as managing and governing agents.
I'm so glad we're having this conversation because I feel like, as everyone has been talking the last few months about agentic AI, we hear a lot of talk about consumer identity and understanding that consumer intent and how agents are going to be planning our next vacation for us and buying our tickets and making our hotel reservations. I don't hear enough about getting that identity right in workforce use of agentic AI. And yet, this is the place where we're seeing the largest rollouts. We're seeing a big push from boards of directors who are asking businesses to find the promised productivity from using AI. Absolutely, they're using agents, but to your point, we have best practice around first, second, third line of defense and zero trust that we apply to our human workforce. We need to be thinking about how we are using those same practices and enforcements and guardrails to enable this new agentic
You're
workforce
spot
as
on.
well.
You're spot on. Exactly. So you're spot on the other aspect as well, which is as we started to understand the AI space and what are the needs of our customers, we saw almost 80% of the use cases were about internal products and internal solutions because productivity is certainly the hot topic everywhere.
Sure.
And the nervousness around rolling that out into production or, the company production for everybody's usage because of this access control, let's say lack of access control. So that
Mhm.
absolutely is and was the place where we started and we saw the engagement with our customers for internal tooling. Certainly we are seeing, and you're absolutely right, we're seeing on the consumer side more voice. The reason is consumers are way more scared because they are worried about the trust being broken. Think about it. If you are using a vacation agent or planning agent and you give the job, let me take my example that a beach vacation is what I want in the next vacation. A beach vacation can be in the most costliest place with 5-star versus, backpacking. And I
Sure.
might have a certain financial controls that I would want to put, right? Versus a different person. And those controls need to be in place. So certainly consumers are talking and worrying about it, which is great because that's how the builders will take that into account and build trust. But
Yes.
the internal product use case is absolutely a lot more. And the security principles, which is the beauty, does
Mhm.
not change with agentic AI.
Right.
We need the tools and technology that applies the same security principles for agentic AI. And that's what, from the identity space, certainly Okta is driving the AI security solutioning.
So we're talking about enabling and empowering these agents to be part of our workforce augmentation and get that productivity gain that we all are desiring, and having humans work alongside these agents. If we flip that a bit, have you given some thought to about how these autonomous agents or even external agents are changing the nature of fraud or security attacks? Do you hear concerns from CIOs, CTOs about the nature of the change of vulnerability or the change of attacks compared to traditional, say, human-driven threats?
Absolutely, there's a change in the attack pattern, right? I'll give you a very obvious one that I shared with another group. Think of how we control attacks, right? In traditional ways, how we set up our infrastructure. Very common thing, and that is absolutely shifting, which is we think of, our infrastructure scale as like daytime usage because everybody wakes up and that's the peak time versus nighttime. And of course, if you're a global company, you optimize differently. Another example I would give is we talk about bot detection or protecting ourselves from bots. And again, it's a bot versus human fight. Yes, there are a few good bots, but those are, search bots. That's going to absolutely shift. There's another way of protecting our system and infrastructures. We say that there's certain geographic regions where we don't do business. So let's make sure there's no traffic comes from there, right? These are very usual or traditional and certainly logical way of how we used to do things. It's going to
Yes.
change because agents don't sleep. So the morning and peak time, all of that planning of infrastructure is going to be different.
Hmm.
Now we don't have bad bots versus humans. Now we have bad bots, good bots, and humans, right?
Right.
So like
Right.
that's new category has to be acknowledged, and we need to give space to that good bot to actually hit our system. And
Hmm.
that scale is going to be very different. Very simple. We think of fraud because we're talking fraud as a conversation. If someone logins into the page in a certain time period, few more times, then that's a fraud. That's not human. That's going to be different because if you have that vacation package agent trying to hit something, that's going to be at a different rate. And we
Right.
need to allow that to happen.
Hmm.
So, absolutely, the way business has to think and business has to operate and business has to set up both security, but also infrastructure thoughts and thinking has to shift. Scale will be different. Borders will be different. And I would add another point of view here is the appetite for breach and fraud is going to be very different from consumers. How you are successful in the business is absolutely is going to be depend on how you protect your customers from breaches and fraud. Because I'm not going to be comfortable if an agent books a certain vacation of a certain value. It's a one-time thing. If one time that happens, I'm out.
Right.
And
Right.
I might be not just out from vacation agenting solution. I might not then trust any agentic platform and solution. So the appetite for fraud is going to be very different. So
Hmm.
there's a lot of changes and shifts. And that's why I called out that as leaders, we have to make sure that we are learning and sharing with each other because tech community has to be ready for it.
I agree. You mentioned many times the word trust, and it makes me think about how our concept of trust, that evolution of trust, and how we define trust in an identity first type of security profile, that trust definition is going to be evolving. Because historically, just as you said, bots were bad. Bots
Yeah.
were things that were attacking.
Yeah.
And now we're going to have bots which are going to be a mix of good bots and bad bots, and good bots with perhaps fraudsters behind them, or well intentioned consumers that have rogue bots that are operating on their behalf. So there's going to be this collection of different types of scenarios and different types of identity aspects that will change how we think about trust and how we think about identity first security. So, as you're talking with your clients and with your customers, Bhavna, what practical steps do you recommend organizations take for future proofing their frameworks when they're starting to roll out agentic AI at scale?
There's a lot to think about. And one thing that I would say before I give more, 1, 2, 3 answer, which is that I would, and I know many of us are, but I would call out that we can't think about the agentic space as to here's how I used to do things, and I'm going to put agent in that process or in
Mm.
those workflows, right?
It's
We
not
need
that
to think about
simple, is it?
agentic space. Yeah, we need to redefine. We need to rethink. I used to do it this way. I'm going to do it differently because now I have this another powerful technology and tools, right? That is certainly a basic aspect, which in some places I'm seeing not happening. And certainly, with conversation, we are thinking differently. That said, number one thing I would call out is bringing the right perimeter and setting the right perimeter. And if you were not thinking about identity before, you absolutely should be thinking about identity before. Identity for agentic technology. And as a technology leader, I like neutrality. So I know it might sound like I'm pitching Okta, but hey, I don't see any other solution out there. But given the AI evolution and so much is changing, the code generation tool that was the best is now we have a different code generation that is, it's just in a year. So something that's shifting so much, you want to think about picking the technology for identity that is neutral, that allows you to pick and choose whatever you want and not hold into a certain time. So that's certainly one thing I want to call out. The number two I would call out is having your data controls in place. So what is the right access? Who should have access? This is beyond identity, right? Because you can put identity controls to access the data, but if you don't know where your critical data is, where confidential data is, and where's data that you're comfortable and open to sharing, and where's PII data, then how do you know what controls to put? So
Hmm.
understanding what data you're okay with to present in which way and which kind of control, that is the second layer that has to be in place. If you don't have it, one time you break the trust, bringing it back takes a long time. The third thing I would call out is tracking and auditing. That's super key. So if you have the controls, if you have the understanding of the data, and you have your systems and solution in place, how do you make sure it's being done right? How can you go back and say, oh, this happened 20 times, it was done right. The 21st time it was wrong. I need to go trace back and see what led to it. What new
Hmm.
data that fed into the system that led to this new outcome. Having that understanding so you can bring back the right control, super key. So traceability, or I would call it transparency overall. And lastly, extending to the very point of view that I said learning, I think standards are super duper important. We talked about MCP and few other standards, but would say all of us need to lean into it because those standards will play a role into how integrated we are. And in the agentic space, integration is going to play a key role. You already see your solution cannot be powerful if it cannot connect to half of your SaaS applications, right? So integration is going to play a key. And if your team is spending 1 week to build the solution and 2 months to integrate, that's a battle lost already. So I think that's where standards, connectivity, and cross app conversation will play a role. So those are the four things I would call out from a tech point of view.
It's great pieces of advice. If I reflect back what you said there, that transparency, that technology neutrality, at least for now, so that we can be nimble as this space is rapidly changing. Great advice. Making sure we have the right control mechanisms in place because it's going to be a bit unpredictable as well. That certainly lends itself to having the right traceability, the transparency, which I think is going to be needed in all different kinds of ways, right? Even to ensure that there's fairness and that we're eliminating bias as we put these controls in place.
Very right. Yeah.
Right. And then the standards, as you mentioned, I completely agree. I think this is going to be an evolving space. There's going to be a lot of folks and businesses coming forward with proposed alliances, standards, and we're going to be watching all of those because it's going to take some time before we see things like regulation and compliance coming in with a standard definition that we all are around, or some NISP standards in this area. I look forward to participating in those bodies, but in the
Yes.
meantime, we need to just keep an eye on what are becoming de facto standards as a lot of these technologies roll out. And the more businesses that are involved in those, the more thorough and better those will be, I think, in terms of their applicability.
That's what I love about tech community, which is, as you rightly pointed, the laws and the regulations come after.
Yes.
But we are also very good with understanding and self-regulating and questioning our own best practices. I mean, responsible
Right.
AI is already a conversation while
Yes.
the outcome is different because we do listen to our customers and we want to make sure that we resonate with their fear, let's say, or pain point and address that.
Yeah, and what they're excited about as well too, the vision, right? So kind of I think that's a good segue as we look ahead to the future, Bhavna. Maybe it's the very near future, right? Things are moving so fast. How do you see that interplay between AI, identity, fraud? How do you see that evolving and what excites you the most?
I'll give you a quick anecdote from just today.
Okay,
So as I was looking at our roadmap and I was reviewing it, and a conversation led into, "Oh, but this is not the AI team. So, like, why are we saying that this is an AI category and all of that?" And that's where the conversation went. And very quickly we realized that as we continue, there's not going to be a separation of AI work versus non-AI work because AI is going to play into everything, right?
right, right,
So that is certainly an interplay that we have to accept, which is that AI is going to play and be part of every internal tooling, product development, fraud protection, customer trust building, customer delight building, all of the above, right?
right.
As I think about that as a future, I think the number one is what's just because maybe I'm in the cybersecurity space or I've worked in these fraud and I've seen so much going on. I worry, number one, what's the protection layer?
Yes,
And those capabilities needs to play a very strong, or I would say leading role. Identity is an area where Okta is playing, certainly as AI security. There are other places where, in terms of protection, that those organizations and companies who are in that space needs to play a leading role rather than let the things happen or the bad things happen and then come into it. So that's very important. Protection layer. Because
yes,
without protection, we can't build trust and we cannot adopt the technology. Then number two is we talked about fraud and all of these issues, but I think the best part about this technology is because it's unpredictable. Is because it brings this delight of newness and like, oh, I didn't think about it and all that. And you
hmm
can have an honest conversation with this technology feeling like a friend or another person on the other side. When I rolled out code generation tool, I was trying to measure productivity and I asked one of the engineers, so what do you think? And their answer was that I felt like I had a senior engineer level person to work with throughout the
wow,
process. That is amazing. We talked about pair programming and all of that. So that is certainly playing into the delight aspect of the technology. And I certainly want to make sure that we all as technology leaders, we should hone into that and make sure that we are getting the best out of it.
yes,
And then the
yes,
third thing, certainly I would say is we are talking a lot about certain places where AI is playing a role. We're certainly talking about code generation. We're certainly talking about content generation and a few other things. But there's so much that this technology can do, and we still haven't broadened. There's so much white space, I would say, right?
yes.
I mean, there's environmental space. There's so much data, and AI and agentic should and could be doing a lot differently.
hmm
There's humanity, starvation. Like there's so much to do, which we have not even quite talked about. I think it's more being discussed in the commercial area. I would want us to take that conversation and leverage this technology in all of those areas and bring that goodness across the board. But it will start with protection, then the adoption, and then, of course, the expansion is how I see it. As one technologist to the other, it's fascinating to be in this time and period.
It is really fascinating. I do feel very lucky. I share a lot of the same sentiment that you do that we're watching this unfold in front of our eyes. I also look forward to the creativity that we will see as this technology is democratized and put in the hands of a diverse set of points of views and backgrounds that will want to solve problems in all different kinds of areas of expertise and being empowered by this capability, which in the past had really been the realm of data scientists or those with a lot of compute power. The broadening of that empowerment is going to bring us a lot of breakthroughs and new creative solutions, I think, to our everyday lives.
Yes, that's absolutely true. And I think this conversation certainly unlocks the places of things that we need to look into and places where we need to lean in.
Yes, yes, because there are certainly those opportunities as well. Bhavna, thank you so much for sharing all of your insights with me today. I know that we're going to be seeing each other again very soon. I look forward to seeing you in San Francisco. I also want to thank all of our listeners for joining us for today's episode of the Experian Fraud Frontlines podcast series. We'll see you next time.
Thank you, Kathleen, and thank you, Experian, for giving us space and opportunity to talk about these things, much important ones. And certainly a great pleasure to be in this conversation with you, Kathleen. You're amazing.
Thank you, Bhavna.